you don't need a title to lead. But if you want to be seen as a leader, you do need people to trust you, listen to you, and follow your lead, even without authority. So let's talk about how to build that kind of influence starting from where you are right now. Welcome to Control Your Career. I'm Julia Toothacre, your strategic career consultant, and I'm so glad that you're here. This podcast is about helping ambitious professionals take control of their career with clarity and confidence. This season, we've been digging into real challenges professionals face in their career. Feeling stuck, not being seen, misalignment with values, and getting passed over are just a few of the topics we're tackling this season. And today's topic connects directly to all of that. How do you get people to see you as a leader, even when you're not a manager, when you don't have a leadership title? This is something that I hear from clients a lot. I want to grow. I want more responsibility. I want to make a bigger impact. But even with all of that, the recognition isn't coming. And so many people think that leadership is about a title, but it's really about how people experience you. So in this episode, I'm going to walk you through what it actually means to lead from where you are, how to build a leadership presence without managing people, and how to use my Control Your Career process to start building that influence right now. P.S. The Control Your Career process is also the foundation for the book that I'm writing. Yes, we're writing a book. I know. It's crazy to me too. But let's get into it. So why is leadership not about the title? Well, first of all, people confuse position with perception. These are two different things. Leadership is about ownership and influence and consistency in how others see you and respond to you, their perception of you. You can hold a leadership title and still not have influence in an organization or the respect of people because you don't have the right perception. You don't have that influence. You don't have the consistency. You don't have people who have your back, right? But those who do, they are the ones that are truly leading with or without the title. So being the go-to person, we talked about this in another episode, the one that people already trust, that's already a form of leadership. You're already there to some extent. You don't need to manage others to make strategic decisions or to offer insight or to help move people forward, right, in the work that they're doing. These are all things that you can do without having a leadership or management title. So one of the things that you have to think about in being a leader is it's not necessarily about that title. Again, it's about influence, impact, and credibility. I've seen in so many workplaces people who have zero leadership title, but they have significant influence on the culture of the team, on decisions that are made, on recognition, because they are that influential in the team, on the team, right? And so you might be leading already and you don't even know it. And so one of the things that I want you to think about as a professional is don't wait for the title, okay? Don't wait for the title to act like a leader. Start with, the behaviors and the actions that are going to set you up to be a leader separate from those job titles. Because honestly, those job titles are so few and far between that if you want real impact, you want to be the person that the leader comes to because they know that you can influence others. That's true influence. That is true impact. Okay, we're going to get into the control your career framework. And if you are new here, this is a process that I created. It is 5 stages, and we are going to walk through each of those stages with this topic in mind. And so this idea that we can be a leader without having any kind of official title, and how do we do that? So stage 1 is going to be realistic reality. So this is looking at our situation at the core of the truth. So a lot of times we have feelings around the situation that we're in, and those feelings are valid, and we always want to validate our feelings. But when we're looking at our realistic reality, we have to take a step back from that and go, what is actually happening here? So for some of you who want the leadership and really have not recognized it, your realistic reality might be a little bit more related to how can I start to do things that showcase me as a leader? And for some of you, it's going to be recognizing that you're already there. You already do have influence, and you already do have these leadership capabilities. You just haven't recognized them up until now. So one of our core questions for stage 1 in this topic is going to be, what is the gap between how you see yourself and how others experience you? That's going to be an interesting one to answer, I can tell. So here's what we have to ask ourselves. How do people talk about you in meetings, one-on-ones, or reviews? So obviously in our annual performance reviews, sometimes those can sound very formalized, but if you have a good manager, they're going to give you some decent feedback, and you have to really hear that. If you're in a situation where you get to do 360s and you get feedback from other people on your team or within the organization, a lot of times I think we look at that feedback and we dismiss it. We don't really take it in. We don't look at what people are saying and go, oh, is this me? I think we tend to put it off sometimes. So what I want you to do is go back and look at some of those reviews if you have them available, and really lean into what that feedback is, positive or negative. You have to consider it all. If you don't have that, or you're not quite sure, then from this point forward, really pay attention to how people are talking about you, specifically your manager. So what is the language that they're using about you? And you can even ask questions around that as well. You want to understand the role that you play within the team and the organization. So are you someone who is dependable? Are you someone who's strategic? Are you supportive? Are you directive? Like, there are so many words that people use to describe others, and you want to understand what those words are being said about you, because sometimes we have a way that we think we're coming off, and we're not. So, right, the way that other people experience us is what we have to figure out. So I knew that I was somebody who was really direct and no nonsense. And that was also how others described me. And so that was really helpful. I will say one particularly impactful piece of feedback that I got from a coworker who was a really dear friend of mine. He said to me, "You know, you're a nice person, right?" And that phrase really took me back. And I said, "Am I?" And he's like, "Yeah, you are. I see people come in and out of your office. You're laughing. They come out with a smile. Like, people are happy to be around you. You are a nice person." Well, this was a while back. So my impression of myself internally was very negative because of feedback I had received early on in my career and just kind of throughout my life, because people did not like my directness. They saw that as me being mean. And in the work that I was doing, my directness was actually a value. It was something that people really liked about me. Even as a coach to this day, it's a lot of times why people hire me, because they know that I'm going to be direct and I'm not going to sugarcoat things for them. So it took me a while to adjust that perception. And then I finally started to lean into that language and go, hey, I'm going to be very direct, but I'm also going to be supportive. It sounded weird to say, I'm a nice person. That seems weird, but supportive, right? That was what I took out of that conversation. And I still use that language today. Probably, gosh, it's been oh man, 13 years probably since I had that conversation. Okay. So something else to consider when we're trying to figure out how we see ourselves and how others experience us. Do people ask for your input or just your help? So it's one thing to be asked to help execute on something, right? It's another thing to ask for somebody's input from a bigger picture, from that more strategic view. And I would say if they're asking for your input, your opinion, that's inherently a leadership position that they are putting you into. If they're asking you for more execution, I think there is some leadership capability in that, but that's a little bit more, I know you can accomplish this task. Whereas input and opinions and thoughts and ideas, that really sets you up into more of a leadership position to that person. And then something else to think about is how are you showing up? So are you showing up with confidence and clarity when you're communicating, when you're in meetings, when you're emailing somebody? Or do you want to stay in the background? Are you doing what you're told? Are you just executing on things? Neither of these are wrong, right? So in this context, some of you are going to hear this and go, well, I don't want to be a leader. That's fine. You don't have to be a leader. This is really for people who want that leadership position. They want to understand and see themselves as a leader. And a lot of times, even if we don't want those leadership roles, we still do have influence. So even if you do want to stay in the background, I've known some extremely powerful background workers who really are the backbone to making certain, offices and departments function. So they have those leadership qualities. They just don't put themselves in that position because it doesn't interest them, right? So there is still a place for you to understand that for yourself. And here's something that I want to make sure we understand. And this actually links back to the previous episode about visibility. You might think that you are showing leadership. It might happen in these like one-on-one settings or maybe kind of passively in your situation, but it won't matter if nobody else sees it. Okay. So this is one of those, again, it's visibility, it's influence, it's communication around what you are doing and how you're doing it, but you have to recognize it first. So a lot of times we don't even recognize that this is something we're already doing. So once we recognize it, now we can make sure that there's some visibility attached to it. So let's step into identity analysis. This is stage 2. And we want to look at who we are at our core as it relates to leadership. So how do you naturally lead? And are you using that style intentionally? So one of the things I'm not going to do in this episode is go through different leadership styles. That feels like a completely different episode. If you want me to do that, let me know and we can do an episode on that. But for the purposes of this, you want to figure out some of your natural leadership style and tendency. So in another episode, I think it was last week's episode, I talked about how I'm more of a COO and not a CEO. And that's because of my natural leadership style. Okay, I am not somebody who can influence a crowd charismatically. I'm not going to get up on a stage and be able to communicate something in a way that's going to bring everybody in. That's just not my style. There are other people much more gifted at that than me. But from a COO standpoint, I'm really good at strategy. I'm really good at communicating and educating people on, different processes and whatever needs to be communicated, right? So I'm really good at that. And so when I think about my leadership style, I'm going to be a coach to you. I'm going to be supportive and I'm going to educate you as much as possible because that is who I am. That is the style that I come with. Okay. So if we're just thinking very naturally about who we are, that's what we want to think about. So here are some questions to help you uncover this for yourself. Do you lead through collaboration, strategy, execution, mentoring, creativity, connection? So you can see that there are a lot of different styles of leadership available to you. That's why when somebody says, I'm not a leader, I can't be a leader, you can be, and you likely are in certain areas within your life or your work. You just might not see it that way. So you have to learn to identify that for yourself. And what leadership styles feel authentic to you and which ones don't? There are some common styles. I know authoritarian style is something that, people talk about a lot because it's not really something that people like anymore, but it's still a style. That might be a style that doesn't work well for you. And so understanding why and doing the opposite of that is really helpful. A lot of times women, I'm making a general statement, a lot of times women prefer a collaborative style. They want to work with others. They want to bring people, together to make sure that everything is working well. Not every female is like that, but it's just a common trait amongst women. Strategy might be something that you excel at. And so when we talk about the leadership style, you might be really good at strategy, but you need a partner for execution. And so understanding that about yourself and what you bring to the table from a leadership perspective. And then this is something I think that is so core to us understanding just who we are in general. But are you trying to emulate leadership behaviors that don't match your personality? This is such a core question to ask. And I think that this happens when we see somebody and we idolize them, or maybe it's a mentor. And the reason that we look up to them is because they are different from us. And we want what they have. We want to be the type of person that they are from a leadership perspective. The problem with that is if we are different, if we have a different personality style, then it's going to be hard for us to get there. It's going to be hard for us to emulate because it's not natural. And so for some of you, it might be, you might be emulating somebody that does match your style. But I know for me, I love working for leaders and being around leaders who are different from me, not because I want to be them, but because I partner well with them. And so that's something that I want you to think about in your position, in your career. Like, who are you looking up to? Why are you looking up to them? Does it make sense for your personality? So one of the things that I will never do is tell you that you need to be somebody that you're not. I want you to know who you are at your core. That's part of this stage, right? That's part of identity analysis just across the board. You have to understand who you are, and then how do you function within that in the context that you want to be in from a career perspective. And that's a lot of what we're doing today when it comes to leadership. So who are you naturally as a leader? And instead of trying to emulate somebody that does not align with who you are, how do we take that natural part of you, the natural leadership that you come with, and how do we put that out into the world? How do we enhance that? Right? So don't fight against yourself with this. Really figure out who you are at your core and go from there. And then, you'll notice that I talk about values a lot because I think it's so central to who we are. And one of the questions you want to ask in this context is, what values are guiding how you lead? Right? So this can look like a lot of different things, but if you haven't taken my values assessment, I highly recommend it. I'll link it into the blog post for this episode, but it's really helpful because it does have some leadership components on there, or it just has different things that will help you think about what it means to be a leader. And some of you might have them and some of you might not. It really just depends. But if we think about, going back to collaboration and strategy and execution and all of that, once you figure that out, you can find some values within each of those that are going to help you understand how you naturally lead, and it'll give you some additional language to that. Okay. Remember, leadership, there is no just like common leadership looks like this. Okay. Yes, there are different styles, but this is not like a one size fits all type of, well, is it? Kind of. Well, I don't think that's what I want to say. I think it's more that you have to lead in a way that fits who you are. Okay. So it's one size fits all in that I think that everybody can become a leader in some way, but how you lead is going to look different. Right. So that's where I was going with that. So something that I want you to consider from stage 2 is, when do you feel most like a leader, even if no one calls you a leader? So really think about that. All right, let's head into stage 3, which is purpose-driven plan. So these are our goals. So obviously, whatever you uncovered between stage 1 and stage 2 is going to help inform stage 3. But I would imagine for most of you, it's looking for additional opportunities to lead. Okay. So that's going to be where we are going to focus our time for this particular section. But again, it might look different for you depending on the reflection that you did for stage 1 and stage 2. So what I want you to think about are there projects that you can take ownership of or that you can lead from beginning to end? That's not going to be possible for everybody, but depending on your position and the type of work that you do, there might be some opportunity for that, or there might be something you're working on that already checks that box. Think about mentorship. Depending on where you're at in your career, could you mentor somebody? Is there somebody like junior on your team that, you can just pull under your wing and help guide? Look to, even if you went to college, look at your alumni association and see if there's any mentoring opportunities. Obviously, it's better to do it within the organization in the context of what we're talking about here. But I think too, if you're somebody that's really trying to figure this out, then sometimes starting outside the organization is actually helpful because it'll give you a little bit more confidence to work within the organization. And then, are you showing up in a way that reflects where you want to be? So not where you are, but where you want to go. Or do you have ownership? Do you have influence? These are all things that you want to make sure that you are continually working on. And that might be a goal that you set to put a little bit more effort into that. And we talked about that a lot in the last episode, so that might be worth revisiting as well. And then when we think about the goals for this, right? Is it visibility? Is it growth? Is it decision making? Sometimes we just want to be able to make decisions, right? Because there's such a backlog in a lot of cultures. Or is it influence? So think about that as you're thinking about your goals for this. But I would say overall, if I had to really put a bow on the goals section, purpose-driven plan, I would just really think about, what are you already doing that is leadership oriented that you didn't even realize? And then what is one thing that you want to do to kind of help solidify that leadership title in your head, even if it's not an official title within your organization? So that's what I would think about for goals. Okay. And remember, you don't need the promotion to lead. You need opportunities to practice influence intentionally. Influence is the name of the game when it comes to leadership, and you can be really intentional about that if you can find the right opportunities. Okay, let's talk about action. Stage 4 is always about action. This is usually where I see people fall off. They get excited about the goal, and then all of a sudden we have to do something. we have to take a step forward. And sometimes that can be really intimidating and really hard. We get scared. We're not sure how it's going to be received, all of that. But here's what you have to understand about leadership. Leadership is practiced. It happens. It honestly becomes just part of who you are. It's not an assignment, right? Especially if it's not part of your title, if it's not something you're expected to do at this point, you have to try to find ways to practice as much as possible. So here are some actions to think about. You want to proactively identify problems and propose solutions. So I see so many professionals that go into a one-on-one and say, here are all of the issues. Here are all of the problems. And they do not propose solutions to the problems. They just want to complain to their manager. It becomes frustrating. And that's when your manager gets frustrated with you. So if there's a particular problem that you feel really passionately about and you want to work on, that's the one that I would take to your manager or whoever you know has influence and say, hey, I see this gap and here's what I think could work. Can I work on this? Just that is you putting forth leadership. That is you looking at a situation, identifying a problem, and figuring out a strategy to solve that problem. That makes you a leader, even if it's not in your title. Can you facilitate a meeting or present findings or lead a debrief? These are small actions that you can take related to projects you're already working on that show leadership. So often we stay in the back. We stay silent for whatever reason. Sometimes we don't feel comfortable in the room. Sometimes we know we're not wanted in a room. That's a big deal for a lot of people, right? But the more that you put yourself out there and say, hey, I'd really like to facilitate this. I would like to present this. That is you stepping up and showing leadership in your position and on those projects, even if you're not the lead on the project. This kind of goes back to the first one, but speak up with recommendations and not just questions. I think a lot of times when we are in meetings and brainstorming sessions and all of that, we're asking questions, we're doing really well with that, which is super helpful, especially if you're asking the right questions. But then we don't come with solutions and recommendations. And I think that's the piece for a lot of people. I want you to make sure that when you're in those rooms and you have a chance to have a voice, you use that voice. When I was back in higher ed, I was in a lot of rooms with faculty, rooms that I was not expected to speak in, but I had a lot of experience and I wasn't even at the table. So there was like the table and then I was outside the table. So a lot of staff had to sit, behind everybody that was actually at the table. And I had no problem speaking up in those meetings because I knew that I had experience that was going to help within the context of the scenario. And that was something that helped me tremendously build credibility among the faculty. Because if any of you have been in education, especially higher education, you know that once you have the faculty on your side, you are golden. And so that was something that I always tried to do. And then when I did that enough, I started being invited to sit at the table because I had a voice. And then another action that some of you are going to balk at, but you have to do it. You have to ask your manager directly, where do you see leadership potential in me? Especially if you have not had this conversation, this is a great question to start, or to say, hey, I've been evaluating myself and trying to figure out where I'm taking in leadership and, where I fit as a leader. What do you see in me? Where can I build that up more? Where do you see some of my strengths? And get that feedback, again, if you have a good relationship with your manager. And so one of the things when it comes to action, especially within this topic, is if you want to be seen differently, you have to show up differently. And so now that you're aware of it, I think some of you probably have been trying to be a leader. You've been wanting leadership positions and you're not quite sure what it looks like. Now you can articulate some of that. You can, look at the situation that you're in, but if you don't take the action, then nobody's going to see you differently. So that's really what you have to make sure that you do is take action, tell somebody, build that influence. And so one question that I want you to think about when it comes to taking action, and this is, again, starting small. What is one small way that you can lead this week without needing permission? So one action that you can take this week. All right, and let's step into stage 5, our high impact habits. This is us building different habits and things into our routines in order to move forward well. So one of the things that you need to ask yourself when it comes to this topic, how can you continue to build trust, credibility, and a leadership presence over time? So this is not something that's going to happen immediately. This is something that you likely either have been building to without really knowing, or you're going to start building and it's going to take some time to see the impact of that. And it might not be a promotion. Again, it might just be influence, visibility, all of those things. So you know that I love the reflections, especially when it comes to habits. After this season, you're going to have so many reflections to do each week and each month. But to start off this process, reflection is really helpful. And so, again, get a notebook, get a notes app, something where you can kind of keep this information, but ask yourself, where did I lead this week and how did it feel, right? Was it natural? Did it just happen? Was it something that felt forced because now you're aware of it? Just make those reflections for yourself so that you can see where you are showing up. Oh, I want to add something back to the actions section that kind of relates to the goals section. I should have said this before, but I want you to also figure out your leadership style. I know we talked about that in goals, but I think as an action, I really want you to do that because that will help you with the reflection for the habits. So make sure that you figure out that leadership style, and then it'll help you write some of these weekly reflections, okay? Tracking is a big deal when it comes to habits, especially so that we can build our own internal credibility, because so many of us don't believe that we are leaders. And so if you can track those leadership moments, so as you do your weekly reflection, maybe also have a section where you say, here are my leadership moments and here's what happened. Or at least keep a record of it so that you can put the results when they happen as well. One thing that I think is so underrated in terms of just education amongst professionals in general is using leadership language. This is something that I want you to start to be conscious of in how you communicate one-on-one as well as in meetings. So you want to start thinking in terms of outcomes. You want to start thinking strategically. You want to look at big picture, but also be able to execute. And how you frame things, how you talk about the projects and the situations that you're in will show people whether or not you're coming at it from a leadership lens or from a worker bee lens, for lack of a better phrase. So really start thinking about that. The other side to leadership language, and I don't think this is talked about enough, is taking ownership when things go well, but also taking ownerships when things don't go well. And so being able to stand up and say, hey, we tried this, it didn't work, here's what happened, and here's what we want to do next. So again, it's not just stating what the problem is, but it's coming with a solution and what you would change to move forward. That will really help people see you as a leader. And then I know a lot of companies do this, but getting regular feedback from peers and mentors. If your company is not doing this, if you have some trusted people within your organization, then I would definitely reach out to them and just get some feedback and say, hey, I'm doing a little audit what leadership qualities do you see in me? Or do you see leadership qualities in me? What would they be? Do you have any examples? I think that's a really simple and honest question to ask people that you have a good relationship with. So, one thing to remember when it comes to the habits section, your leadership identity is built through consistent action, not just ambition. So saying that you want to be a leader is great, but there has to be action attached to that. It has to be consistent because people have to see you that way. And so you have to just keep working on that, keep recognizing, and just keep, taking action in a way that's going to set you up for success and allow people to see you as a leader. So if you have been waiting for a title to start leading, I hope that this episode reminds you that you don't have to. You don't need permission to show up with initiative and perspective and clarity. You don't need to manage a team to influence decisions or drive results. Leadership is about how people experience working with you, and that's something that you can start doing right now. And remember, the Control Your Career process gives you a way to do that with intention. When you know how you want to lead, how others currently see you, and where you want to grow, you can start building a leadership identity that fits who you are at your core and one that doesn't depend on any kind of title. All right, I do have a worksheet that helps you walk through the Control Your Career process, give you space to write the different prompts that I have given you today, or any notes or things that you have. You can find that in the blog post, so make sure that you check that out to help you organize your thoughts throughout this process. So if this episode really spoke to where you're at right now, please subscribe so that you don't miss out on what is next. I really recommend most of you watch or listen to the episode before this one. There was a lot of alignment that I think would help if this particular topic was of interest to you. And please share it with a colleague that you know is doing great work and probably ready to lead or has been leading, but really needs to recognize that that's what they are doing. Thanks for listening. And until next time, keep taking control of your career.